Hey friends, so I want to be first really transparent in that yes, I am not filming this in my home studio, but from the car wash after work. So yeah. Uh, Also want to give a little explanation that these videos that I'm about to be posting, especially this one today, these were done as part of a series of interviews for a class that I was teaching at Georgia College. I'm not there anymore, but I am still teaching for some other universities online. But then also I wanted these to be a series of videos that other educators can also use in the classroom when it comes to different interviews and topics within communications and mass comm, PR fields. So, with that said, the branding will kind of evolve. It might seem a little disjointed, and I apologize for that, but I'm just going to let it go and evolve as it does. So, yeah. Now we are on to your regularly scheduled programming. Also, I'm filming this from my iPhone in the car. I guess that's kind of obvious, so I'm not really sure where exactly to look to be centered. Sorry. Oh, and also the reason I'm filming this after work in the car wash is because if I don't go ahead and just do it while I'm thinking about it, it's never gonna happen because I never have the time to actually get into my home studio. Thanks, y'all. There we go. It says recording has started. Let everyone know they are being recorded. There we go. And I'm going to also record separately for audio as well, just so I've got two versions just in case. So anyway, so you and I think connected first on LinkedIn. I don't think we were at Mercer at the same time. I think I must have seen one of your posts and sent you a request. So tell me, you went to undergraduate at Mercer, correct?
Yes. So I got my bachelor's degree in journalism. I graduated in 2019. So I was there from 2015 to 2019 at the Center for Collaborative Journalism.
Yes, definitely after my time at Mercer. Hey, go Bears!
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So how did you get started in all this? What did you do in college? What was your background? Did you know you wanted to go into journalism? Just start us from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and you're going to make my Southern come out. This happens too. Every time I talk with my grandma, who's in Georgia right now, she's got that Southern accent. You're going to hear me dip back into mine. But I'm originally from Georgia. I'm from McDonough, Georgia. And I've always been interested in telling stories. For my siblings growing up, I used to, play games with them where I would, be their pen pal, or I would write like a little newspaper for them to read. I think I was just excited about storytelling and communicating from a very young age. When I started on the journalism track in high school, I joined the school newspaper, and I was really into writing, but I also thought that broadcast journalism might be a path I would want to consider. I was a big fan of Anderson Cooper on CNN, and I kind of thought that would be fun to pursue news media. I had heard about Mercer University's journalism program. So, what really stood out to me about the program there is that they have this kind of teaching hospital model where you don't have to wait until you're an upperclassman in college. You can just jump right in and start working with local media. So that was really attractive to me. So I got there. I started my journalism classes again in fall of 2015, and I was really excited about the idea of maybe being in broadcast media one day. Um, I Throughout my time taking classes there, I was able to apply for a Couric Fellowship at
Mm.
Mercer, which that I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program, but it places students from the journalism school in local media internships, and it basically funds you to do that work. So I applied for one, and I was placed at Georgia Public Broadcasting, the Macon member station, and the rest is history. We're working there with the station manager and a reporter who was there. I fell in love with audio. I just think it opened up a completely different world for me to think about storytelling. And I like to tell stories that really connect with people. And I think that audio is an incredible tool to be able to do that. You
Yep.
get to speak, directly in someone's ear. And there's also a lot of like world building. They call audio, theater of the mind. You really can set a scene for someone, pull at their heartstrings. So just kind of taking that term at Georgia Public Broadcasting really opened my horizons and kind of made me think about a different way that I could tell stories. And from then on, I was hooked on audio. Um, and I was looking for other internships and opportunities. And the summer before my senior year at Mercer, I was looking for internships. I wanted to continue working in audio, and I had two choices to pursue. I had two different opportunities. So I'd applied for an internship with NASA, and it was an audio internship. It was the very first audio internship NASA offered.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was just, the role was kind of framed as, hey, come help us experiment with audio. There wasn't really an audio program at the time at NASA, but help us, come and experiment. So I had that. I applied. I got an offer. And then on the other side, I had an offer from Gimlet, the podcast
Okay.
company,
Yep.
where, and this was in New York. And it was another Couric placement opportunity. So I kind of had these two options, and I'm really excited about audio, really excited about podcasting. And I just remember speaking with my mentor at the time, Grant Blankenship, about
A grant.
uh, Grant's amazing,
Yeah.
but about the opportunities. And he said, it sounds like at NASA you'd have the opportunity, you'd have the chance to build something.
Right.
And that really hit home for me. And I decided pretty much after that conversation that I did like to build things, and that I was going to pursue that rather than going on this more traditional podcast track. So the rest, the rest
Is
of the
history.
story, I did very short form experimental audio pieces that were very similar to pieces I had been working on at the member station. They were, you know, audio postcards, which, are you familiar with that?
We haven't talked about it in my classes yet.
Okay. Okay. So at Georgia Public Broadcasting, I was a community features reporter. So I would cover a lot of, community focused stories, and we would go out and capture what we called audio postcards, which they didn't rely on any host VO. So you wouldn't like write lines in to tell what was going on. You would just go on site to where something was happening. You would record audio from that scene, and you would interview an expert from that location as well. And you'd come back and put together a little scene from that moment. So when I started at NASA as an intern in 2018, I did the same thing, but for science. So, I was doing an audio postcard, but it was about the sounds of the sun, so we would get data sonifications from sun science and then pair that with an expert explaining what was going on. And that was, in fact, one of the very first audio postcards I worked on at NASA, and it performed super well. It was the top performing article that year was for that audio postcard.
Do you remember what those numbers are off the top of your head?
Oh, millions and millions of views. It got picked up by CNN.
Wow.
It got picked up by news media. They were saying, NASA reveals the sounds of the sun. And, you know, these stories had, NASA had these stories, right? But it was just about the way we needed to package them to get them out to the world. So, an audio turned out to be a great avenue to explore to make that happen.
Wow. That had to have been just gratifying, I would imagine, because you were an intern in 2018 doing that,
I was an intern, yes.
producing content that got picked up by CNN, millions of views. You're in college doing this. You are the same age as these students, same
Yes,
skill set level, all that.
absolutely.
That is just mind blowing to me. So you do that as an internship, and was that like summer in between junior senior year, or
Yes.
what about? Okay,
And that
so you
was right
mhm,
after my junior year, right before my senior year.
okay, so you come back, you're a senior. What is your senior year like? And then, like, were you already guaranteed a job with NASA? Did you have to apply again? How did that go?
Yeah, so I worked on just backing up to my 2018 summer internship. I worked on a couple of pieces like that. You know, it wasn't a podcast, but they were audio first stories. They were
Right.
created with audio in mind. So I worked on a couple of those, and they perform well. But I think that Hum of the Sun um, piece that just was like the clear stand. I'll send you a link to it as well.
Yeah.
It's still on NASA's SoundCloud today. But so I worked on a couple of pieces like that. And I think that my leadership at NASA in the Office of Communications saw the value in audio really for one of the first times to say, okay, we should maybe look at this a little bit more. Um, so I we were coming up on the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing with Apollo 11,
Wow.
and I was able to pitch a short form podcast called NASA Explorers Apollo. There's this whole NASA series called NASA Explorers, and they're mostly visual, but I got the chance to connect with some of the folks who are working on the series and just said, hey, what if we did an audio season? So I pitched that idea. People were excited about it. And basically, before I left my NASA internship in the summer, I had an agreement in place to freelance for NASA my senior year while I was an independent contractor while I was finishing my college degree. So I would go to classes, and then after my classes, I would be editing this podcast season.
Wow. So it sounds to me that, and not to interrupt you, but what I think is what I was, maybe the subcontext of this is that you were very much a go-getter, almost entrepreneurial in how you handled this and approached it, and you had an idea and we're not afraid to pitch it to those in charge.
Yes. And I think that that's what I always, that is the biggest piece of advice that I like to share with NASA interns today, because I'm a coordinating mentor for our intern office now, because I got such, value from participating, but also to any student or early career professional is, don't just think about how you fit into a certain slot in an organization. Think about how you can build something that adds value. And I think that it
Yeah.
can be a little bit tougher to advance that way, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Well, and then let me ask you this, and this is something that is just coming to me. We didn't necessarily talk about this ahead of time, but and I'm asking this for a reason because I've got some students who have been working on some projects and they're encountering no, but it's something that they're required to do with some clients. So, did you ever have anybody tell you, "I'm not really sure about this," or "No, I don't think so," and did you work around that?
yes. I've been told no many times. I think it's very difficult, especially being a young woman working at an agency like NASA, that, there are so many people I work with who I respect and, value their input so much, but oftentimes I am working with people who have been at this exact organization for decades, and they have an idea of, hey, this is what works, this is what we do, this is what we've always done. Why would
Mhm.
we change? So yeah, I've been told no many times, and I've had to overcome that. I think I'm very persistent, and I think I lean in with kindness, but I'll also, I'm not afraid to back up my ideas. So
Yeah.
using data, working with people outside of NASA, I think has been extremely important. Just going to the experts in the audio industry, for example, and saying, hey, can you take a look at our portfolio? What are we doing right here? What are we doing wrong here? And taking that and bringing that back into the organization, that really helps you state your case.
No, that's so helpful because I think that's something that is very hard to quantify in the classroom, the whole how to get around no, because it's one of those things you almost have to feel your way through it. And
Hmm.
it's like you learn more by experience. That's one of
Yes.
the, I think about how can I teach how to overcome no? And I'm like, I think you should have to
It
experience. Mm.
it's very tough. Yeah, you have to experience it. And I think that there have been, conversations I've had where I've been told no, or hey, this isn't what we're looking for, where I've in that moment I felt so crushed, heartbroken, even because you pour so much love and thought and effort into an idea. But reflecting back on those moments now, sometimes you have to know, especially if an idea really calls to you, that um you you might be right. What if you're right? And I kind of
Right.
look back on some of those conversations, and some of those conversations, yeah, it would, they should have said no. But some conversations, they because we were exploring a new way of doing things, they didn't know that it would perform well or that we could pull it off. So I think time gives you perspective on that.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. So now with that said, how do you even take something like NASA and science, and let's say you don't have a background in science. I mean, I'm assuming you don't. And since yours is more mass comm and whatnot, sorry, my text messages keep going off. I thought I had them set.
Oh, no worries.
I think everybody's probably used to those little dings by now, but um, so being that storytelling is your passion, then how do you do you feel like you have to learn a lot about the subject matter yourself, or do you think it's almost an advantage that you don't necessarily have a background in that?
It is an advantage. It absolutely is an advantage. And in fact, it's something that I, brought up when I had my interview to get my NASA internship in 2018. My boss today was doing the hiring for that position, and I just remember him, I was so nervous about taking that call. I was so nervous. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I have a call with NASA." And he said to me, Katie, you would be the perfect applicant if you had a science background too, if you had some kind of science
Ah,
background. And in that moment, I just felt, my heart sink. And I don't know what what inspired me to say this, but I said, well, are you trying to reach scientists, or are you trying to reach people like me who don't know what's going on in the world of science and space flight?
oh,
And I think, and he was like, well, and I think he pretty much decided to give me the position just based on that. And that's what I try and do. I'm not in my spare time, I'm not reading up on the world of science and making sure I know everything, because I do think that it is a skill that I bring into interviews, to just be able to say, help me understand what is going on. And then I try and relay that to the audiences that we reach.
I think that's such an excellent point because I wonder how many students don't apply for something because they have this automatic assumption that they're not qualified.
Oh, yeah. So many, and especially women, will not apply for positions because they think, oh, I could never do that. I'm not the right person for that. Um, and I think you have to, first off, you have to believe in yourself before other people will believe in you. And it can be very tricky to do that. But that is the key, and you have to be able to sell yourself, connect the dots between where you are and where you want to be, and help a hiring manager envision what a person like you with your skill set could accomplish in a role. I think those are very important skills to bring.
And so that interview that you had, was that for the internship or
That was for the internship.
so you had some pretty serious moxie in that moment because you were, I'm guessing maybe you were 20 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But where I think it came from, I really faced a lot of struggles in college. Like some of my peers, they could, if they didn't get an internship, it was okay because they could go back home for the summer. They had other, kind of backup plans. But for me, I was on my own, independent. I put myself through school. If I didn't make something work for myself, there wasn't a backup plan. It's like you make this happen or, what's going to happen. So I think that gave me that um fortitude, to keep
Yeah.
kind of saying why I deserve to make this opportunity and, hey, and if you give me this chance, let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do
Right.
something, I'm going to do my best, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Um, because I think so many of those things are soft skills that you can't necessarily learn in a classroom, but you do have to learn them through your own personal experience. And
Mhm.
maybe sometimes you have to have things not exactly go your way in
Mhm.
order to figure out the workaround if you want it bad enough.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really, really good point to make. Um, so, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. I'm going to try and keep this to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So, something that I know students are really focused on right now is job interviews. They are starting to apply. They're looking at either graduating at the end of the month or in a couple weeks, and are not really quite sure what they're going to do, or they're looking for internships, that type of thing. So, we talked a little bit about how your internship interview went, but in general, what do you recommend for students? What's out there that you have seen on the audio world? Or do you even think that students who maybe don't but just have like a little bit of audio experience, would you encourage them to go ahead and try an internship along those lines?
Yeah. So I do work with a lot of interns who come through our Office of Communications internship program. And I have a lot of talks focused on, putting your best self forward, applying for your dream job, just, acing the interview. So I do have a couple of tips in my back pocket that I can share. Um, I would say that the most important thing that you can do is to sell yourself through your interview materials, your application materials. And I look at, three. So resumes, cover letters, and portfolios. And I know a lot of students groan whenever they hear about cover letters, especially. But I think when you do have something like, let's say you want to go and do audio storytelling at the New York Times, but you don't have that much experience in audio, maybe you only have a little bit of experience, that cover letter is where you can close that gap and say, hey, yes, I know that maybe I don't have that much experience, but I did do this story and I took initiative in XYZ way. So I know that like I can hit the ground running at the New York Times, for example, just using a scenario there. And then also a mistake that I see and I work with students on their resumes a lot. I will see people write resumes and they have just like the most bland bullet points. And I would say a quick way to go through and just beef your resume up is to think about how to tailor it to where when you're talking about your experience, your bullet points, in a previous role, you write it in a way where those are the things that only you, specifically you, could have accomplished in that internship. That,
Mm,
only Molly could accomplish this, not Katie. And think about that because I think when you ask yourself that question, you go back to your experience and you think, hey, I pitched this idea that got X amount of plays, or I found a way to really make our workflow more efficient. So those are two like quick things that can really help beef up your application materials. And when you have an interview with someone, when you land that interview, they're not looking, they're basically looking for reasons not to hire you, for you to just like say like, oh, you shouldn't do this. Like if you have gotten to the point where someone's interviewing you for a position, they're pretty much sold on you. So you just really need to seal the deal.
That's a very good point. I did hiring. I had a little blip where I worked in hiring for Waffle House.
Oh, fun.
When I couldn't find a comms job there for a little while. And I think you're right. I mean, a lot of times it is figuring out why should I not hire this person? What kind of red flags can
Yep.
I uncover while talking to this person? So I think you're
Mm-hmm.
spot on about that. So before we go, I do want to ask you, what is your absolute favorite project that you've worked on at NASA? And then what was your favorite project that you did in college that you feel like helped you lead into this?
Ooh, I love that question. So, well, my pride and joy. So today I'm NASA's audio lead. I oversee our podcast and audio strategy. In 2020, I launched our flagship podcast, NASA's Curious Universe, which is my pride and joy project. It was a project where I met with senior communications leaders at NASA, and they said, this isn't NASA's podcast. How can we find the Joe Rogan of NASA? And and
It's funny to me.
it was, and I was just like, what? But we tried it anyways, and it's been so successful. It really does represent NASA. It is what a NASA podcast should be. It's adventure based, exploration based, and it really plays on a listener's curiosity. So just being able to develop that podcast from like ideation down to publication of each of the episodes has been very rewarding. My favorite episode that I've worked on has been about the first microphone recorded sounds from Mars during the Mars Perseverance landing a few years back. I was able to work with the team at NASA JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, to get those sounds before they were released to the world and make sure that we had an episode ready to go live when they went live for the first time. That was really cool.
Oh, by the way, before I forget, I will tell you, I found out I went to lunch today with a cousin of mine who was actually also guest lecturing for me.
Oh.
And I told her I was going to talk to you, and she goes, we have a cousin that worked for NASA. And I'm like,
what?
So I don't know what this person did. She said that his name was Sid Simmons, and he moved the family to Cocoa Beach, maybe?
Oh, yeah, for Kennedy Space Center.
I guess so. And we didn't get into what exactly he did, but
I love that.
Is the first time hearing
of it. Well, you got to go get a NASA tour.
I guess so. But I don't want to forget about the college question. What was your favorite project in college?
My favorite project in college. Oh, well, I did so many fun things and just great investigative work, which I don't get to do quite as much in my current role. But I will say one story that really sticks out to me is I worked on a radio story about the reinterment of Muskogee Creek tribe members' ancestral remains at Okmulgee in Macon. And it was a story that, again, my mentor Grant, he had heard about it and was going to report on it. But instead of him reporting on it himself, he gave me the opportunity to step up and publish the story. And I remember we were working on deadline and we were competing with the local newspaper, and they were kind of saying, hey, if you don't go ahead and publish this, like, we're going to publish it. So I just remember that Grant was really great about making sure that I had time to finish that story and report. It was an incredibly, important story to be telling, very meaningful. to, Macon residents who had ties to Okmulgee. And that story ended up being featured on All Things Considered and Morning Edition,
Yeah.
and really was just a key, part of my portfolio. So I'll always be thankful that he, instead of him taking that story and pitching
Yeah.
it, he let me as a student, as an intern, explore and learn so much about dealing with sensitive subject matter like that.
And I think that's also a really good point for educators too. Like we need to not be afraid to let our students take the lead on items because
Yep.
that's the best ways we can teach.
Mm-hmm.
So the absolute last question I promise I'll ask is if students wanted to apply for internships, how do they find them?
So I will follow up with a guide for our internships. I have an audio specific, so we take audio interns still today. And I have an audio storytelling internship specific guide. But if you're interested in any NASA communications internship, or hey, maybe you want to spend a summer being an engineer or scientist, you can go to intern.nasa.gov. Excuse me, and you can see some guidance for applying for those positions. I believe that the summer term for next year is still open.
Okay.
They are paid internships. You get a
Nice.
stipend, and the stipend is based on your level of education. So graduate students get a higher stipend, for example. And I would always say this is another holdover piece from just applying to jobs, but anytime you apply for an internship or a job, it's not enough to hit submit. You need to go look up, find someone who is in a role at that company and send them a note and say, hey, I applied and I just wanted to pass along my application materials and tell you how excited I am to work here. So
Nice. And that advice dovetails on some things that our guest speakers were saying actually in class today about
really,
yeah, because they were saying it's not a bad idea to connect on LinkedIn, to figure out if you have mutual connections, to send that note. That's, yeah. I mean, so it's great that you're saying that.
yeah, I mean, I know, well, we're wrapping up here, but I just recently hired for a position on my team, and we had this applicant who was like ticked all the boxes, was like amazing. I connected with him on LinkedIn. He reached out to me and said, hey, I applied. When I got the application materials from the HR office, they had not included him, even though he was one of the most competent applicants. So I actually had to say, hey, did you happen to get any applications from this person? Or did you get this person's application? And they said, oh, yeah, I don't know how we missed that. Here it is. So you never know.
I
You
think
never
that's a
know.
really good point because sometimes these things simply happen. I mean, because there's so many applications coming in, and sometimes things just get slipped through the cracks. So
Yep.
no, that is fantastic. Katie, thank you so much for joining
Thank
me.
you.
Here almost closing time on a Friday, and yeah, I'll be looking forward to those links, and I'll let you know when I get this all up and posted.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Molly. It's really been a pleasure. I appreciate again just you reaching out and extending the opportunity. And yeah, go Bears.
Absolutely. Go Bears.
Awesome.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.